Okay. If you exit Zoom on the laptop, Hare Krishna. Okay, how many temple residents do we have? How many people stay at the temple? It's 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9. About 11, about 12. We have one of the 12 residing residents. Okay, and some on the Zoom. So chapter 6, Sankhya Yoga. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashrita Karma Palam Karyam Karma Karoti Yaha Sannyasi Cha Yogi Cha Na Niragnir Na Cha Kriyaha. The Blessed Lord said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no work. Yasanyasam iti prahur yogam tam vidi pandava na hyasanyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kashchana. What is called renunciation is the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme. For no one can become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. Arurukshor munir yogam karma karanam uchyate yoga rudasya tasyaiva shama karanam uchyate. For one who is a neophyte in the eightfold yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one who has already attained to yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. Yada hi nindriyarteshu na karmasvanas nusujate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yoga rudas tadochate. A person is said to have attained to yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. Udared atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayat atmaiva yatmano bandhur atmaiva ripur atmanaha. A man must elevate himself by his own mind, not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Bandhur atmanatmanas tasya yenatmaivatmanajitaha anatmanastu shatrutve varte tatmaiva shatruvat. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his very mind will be the greatest enemy. Jitatmana prashantasya paramatma samahitaha shitoshna sukha dukeshu tatamana pamanayaho. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached. For he who has attained tranquility, to such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Jnana vijnana triptatma kutashto vijitendriyaha yukta ityuchate yogi samalostrashma kanchanaha. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi or mystic when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. Suhrin mitrar yudasina madhyasta dvesha bandushu sadhushvapi chapapeshu samabudhir vashishyate. A person is said to be still further advanced when he regards all, the honest well-wisher, friends and enemies, the envious, the pious, the sinner, and those who are indifferent and impartial with an equal mind. Yogi Unjita Satatam Atmanam Rahasi Stitaha Ekaki Yata Chitatma Nirashir Aparigraha. A transcendentalist should always try to concentrate his mind on the Supreme Self. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. Okay, so back to text one. The Blessed Lord said, "One who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life. He is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no work." Purport. In this chapter, the Lord explains that the process of the Eightfold Yoga system is a means to control the mind and the senses. However, this is very difficult for people in general to perform, especially in the age of Kali. Although the Eightfold Yoga system is recommended in this chapter, the Lord emphasizes the process of karma yoga or acting in Krishna consciousness. Emphasizes that the process of karma yoga or acting in Krishna consciousness is better. Everyone acts in this world to maintain his family and their paraphernalia, but no one is working without some self-interest, some personal gratification, be it concentrated or extended. The criterion of perfection is to act in Krishna consciousness and not with a view to enjoying the fruits of work. So I'll continue the purport in a minute. But just before this on Zoom, we kind of cut it short because the Zoom went into the RT. But we were doing a class on nectar of instruction, and we had brought up the point how in scripture, and also as Srila Prabhupada has emphasized in his lectures and purports, which is also scripture, but in scripture and also in Prabhupada's lectures, he emphasizes the point that the householder gives 50% of their income to expanding Krishna consciousness. So to the service of spreading Krishna consciousness. And we kind of started a discussion on it, but we didn't get to actually get in, talk about it more because we ended the Zoom quickly. But yeah, that's the prescription. And we see the examples that are given in Shastra, such as Raghunath Das or Bhatta. Raghunath Das Goswami, I think. We see the example where he gave 50% of his wealth for Krishna consciousness, and the other 50 was saved for family, and then he went to go find Lord Chaitanya. And then there's another example in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of a devotee named I'm just forgetting his name now, but he didn't have much money of anything at all. His occupation was making plates out of banana tree leaves, and with the like change that he makes from that, he also used 50% of that for Krishna consciousness. It was for the worship of Mother Ganga, and Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport how this is the example that this devotee is doing. In the purport, Prabhupada explains if one has millions of dollars or doesn't even have pennies, like this devotee, still he's setting the example of giving 50% of his wealth for the propagation of Krishna consciousness. And that can be done in many ways, but that principle is there, and it's emphasized all throughout Srila Prabhupada's speaking and writing, because the purpose of all of our activities is to serve Krishna. So it's not just like this is some like cultural talk or like religious talk on how to be, happy and like live a nice life. Those things come as symptoms of Krishna consciousness in many ways, no doubt, happiness and all these sorts of things. But the goal is, how can one become fully surrendered to Krishna and engage in his service? because that's the natural position of the living entity. Not that we're the body, because we've had millions of bodies and millions of families and millions of occupations, but we're the soul. And right now, the soul has a very uh, valuable chance to perfect his journey throughout all of these 8,400,000 species of bodies in this material world since time immemorial, and just fully commit himself to engaging in the Lord's service. So you can read some of purpose and lectures and talks. I'm thinking of a lecture now with Srila Prabhupada where he's saying you can give your whole life to Krishna as given in this example that they read from. He said, or if you're, working and have a home, you can give 50% of your wealth to Krishna. And he said, Krishna is already giving so much to you. He's giving, all of your necessities of life, giving you 100% protection. He's maintaining and providing everything for you. So you can't give. He didn't laugh, actually. I didn't mean that. But he said 50, you can't give 50% to him. And then someone laughed. And it says laughter in parentheses in the transcript. And then after that, it says don't laugh. So I didn't mean to laugh in it. But so that principle is there. And yeah, the whole point, like what we were reading in the Nectar of Instruction, is that one doesn't need so many artificial necessities. You know, I I looked up one article just after we were speaking on it where someone um was saying it was on krishna.com. I don't know really what that is, but it was the first thing that came up and they were saying I don't understand this 50% point because if somebody makes they said $20,000, then you have to take away the taxes and that's already almost half of it. And then they wrote down the expenses and they were saying 700 for traveling, this 1,000 for like electric, this much for uh TV, this much for, but those points were there. But then also just in Nectar of Instruction, we were just reading how all of these artificial necessities, this was the whole point of the beginning of the verse, is that these things aren't actually needed for a real Krishna conscious society, which would be if someone doesn't need to over collect. This is what was spoken at the very beginning of the purport, is that someone doesn't need to over collect if they just have enough land to grow their food and a milk cow. Then there's no more traveling. Then there's no more of these unnecessary necessities or artificial necessities, such as, there's the electricity and the TV and the this and the different gadgets. But one can actually live simply, and then they have more time to focus on spiritual life. And that's demonstrated really nicely in our Krishna conscious farm communities that are, fully following Srila Prabhupada's instruction and doing that. You can see there's many families who live on a farm and they don't have all of these artificial things and they're happy. No one has to drive really far to do their work. Their work is right there on that farm, and it's self-sustainable, and they get everything they need, and they don't need to worry about extra um, things and maintaining extra things. And it's a safer environment too. You don't have so many of the problems that come with this artificial society of where, both of the mother and the father in a family have to work, places that are far away from the home, and then the family is more spread out and all that. So that example was given in the beginning of that verse of Nectar of Instruction of what that kind of ideal, simple living and higher thinking looks like, is that one doesn't need all of these artificial things. But there's are there any more like points maybe about that with the 50% thing? Because there was a whole discussion on yeah, one mic would be good. The blue one I think has battery. Um, near the sound box. Thanks.
Yes.
No, I don't know why.
Okay, here we go. Hare Krishna. What I was saying in the lesson today, or on the Zoom today, was that I referred to the story of the widow's mite, the parable that Jesus shared, where he talked about um, this widow gave, and I'm just paraphrasing it right here, but this widow gave a very tiny, small amount of money, almost pocket change, if you will, but it's all she had.
Mm.
And a rich man came along and wanted to make himself look good. And he gave, you know, a nice sum of money, but it was nothing that was a sacrifice for him to give, something that was quite easy for him to give. It's like pocket change for him. And Jesus said, the gift that she gave me, even though it was a very small amount that most people think was worthless, meant more to her than what you gave me. So it was the sacrifice of the giver. Is that what the parable to me teaches is the sacrifice of the giver and what it means to given, because she gave up personal needs of hers for for wisdom, for the spirituality, and ultimately to her guru, to her teacher, if you will, if you look at it that way. And then the rich man, he wanted to make a nice show, but it wasn't a sacrifice for him. In comparison, his gift was much smaller than hers.
Yes, but that is the principle, is that the majority of one's wealth should be used for God consciousness. And in that way, that activity of earning money is becomes Krishna conscious, becomes spiritualized. Of course, there's probably a lot more points about that since it's a very practical thing that I'm sure a lot of people are working with and dealing with. But we can continue on because that was the essence of it there. To act in Krishna consciousness is the duty of every living entity because all are constitutionally parts and parcels of the Supreme. The parts of the body work for the satisfaction of the whole body. The limbs of the body do not act for self satisfaction, but for the satisfaction of the complete whole. Similarly, the living entity who acts for satisfaction of the supreme whole, not for personal satisfaction, is the perfect sannyasi, the perfect yogi. So that's real renunciation, is that actually Krishna already owns everything. So then rather than just throw things in the trash or give them up, better is to use them in Krishna's service. So this is the mindset of a devotee, one who's fully God conscious, which means one who's fully God conscious. The symptoms are described in the Bhagavad Gita. I'm not talking about like me or someone who's like just practicing for a little bit of time, but this is the person who's God conscious. We Krishna explained some of his symptoms earlier. Arjuna asked, "How does he sit? How does he walk? How all these things?" That person is only concerned with Krishna. They don't even care about this material body and its maintenance. They forget about it, and Krishna maintains them. He's maintaining every living entity in the whole world, all of the different elephants and things like that. So why wouldn't he protect or maintain one who's fully surrendered to him? So that person who the symptoms are given, they're not disturbed by happiness or distress. They're not concerned with this material body. They're um, they're actually blissful because their satisfaction comes from seeing that Krishna is satisfied, and in that way, they're not miserable by depending on so-called happiness from this material world, which always has ups and downs, duality, and even whatever happiness it does provide is like very meager. It's just some contact of the senses with the sense objects. So that self-realized person or the devotee of God, of Krishna, they're blissful. They're not disturbed by the ups and downs of this world. That person engages in perfect renunciation by using everything in Krishna's service, whatever it is. They're giving their whole life and soul for Krishna because they see that I'm actually, who am I? I'm not this body or anything to do with this world and this temporary situation that I'm in for this whole lifetime, but I'm actually an eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in that way, they use everything for Krishna's satisfaction. This is a really nice one. The sannyasis sometimes artificially think that they have become liberated from all material duties, and therefore they cease to perform Agnihotra yagyas, fire sacrifices. But actually, they are self interested because their goal is becoming one with the impersonal Brahman. Such a desire is greater than any material desire, but it is not without self interest. Similarly, the mystic yogi who practices the yoga system with half open eyes, ceasing all material activities, desires some satisfaction for his personal self. But a person acting in Krishna consciousness works for the satisfaction of the whole without self interest. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for self satisfaction. His criterion of success is the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus he is the perfect sannyasi or perfect yogi. Lord Chaitanya, the highest perfectional symbol of renunciation, prays in this way. Nadanam najanam na sundarim kavitam va jagadisha kamaye mama janmani janmanishvare bhavatad bhaktir ahaituki tvai. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor to enjoy beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. What I want only is the causeless mercy of your devotional service in my life, birth after birth. Okay. What is called renunciation is the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme. For no one can become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. Purport. Real sannyas yoga or bhakti means that one should know his constitutional position as the living entity and act accordingly. The living entity has no separate independent identity. He is the marginal energy of the Supreme. When he is entrapped by material energy, he is conditioned. And when he is Krishna conscious or aware of the spiritual energy, then he is in his real and natural state of life. Therefore, when one is in complete knowledge, one ceases all material sense gratification and renounces all kinds of sense gratificatory activities. This is practiced by the yogis who restrain the senses from material attachment. But a person in Krishna consciousness has no opportunity to engage his senses in anything which is not for the purpose of Krishna. So that's how it's done. As long as we're in this material world, we've been here since time immemorial. So this is real psychology. Many people are interested in psychology nowadays, and there's many different books like 7 Habits of Great Person and 8 Highly Effective People, How to Have Friends, and this and that. And so there's so many psychology books, but Srila Prabhupada gives us the full picture of psychology. Psychologists only go back to people's childhood and say what happened in their childhood might affect them now. But from Krishna's perspective and the Vedic perspective, we can see not only what happened in their childhood, but what had happened in their previous lives and what happened life after life after life, and their sinful reactions and pious reactions and the sinful and pious activities they were doing in this life. All of these have a factor to play in somebody's conditioning today. So the way to actually get out of this conditioning, which has kept us in this material world for so long, going up and down like a Ferris wheel, sometimes to higher life, heavenly planets where there's more sense gratification, and then even sometimes down to hellish planets where it's simply miserable. What keeps us here is that material conditioning, trying to enjoy this material nature, these lusty desires in the heart, that okay, I can be the enjoyer and arrange this world for my enjoyment. So how to get out of that? Because we are conditioned since time immemorial to try to exploit the resources of material nature for our selfish desires. That's like the automatic function of the conditioned being. But our real automatic function or our real natural state is to serve Krishna's desires, to satisfy Krishna. So how do we get back to that original state? It's like if you have a piece of metal and it becomes rusty, it doesn't get attracted to the magnet. But in our natural state, without the rust, we're attracted to the magnet of Krishna's lotus feet. So the way to get out of this material conditioning, which keeps us in this material world doing so-called pious and sinful activities over and over again, and going through so many species of life, is to fully engage in Krishna's service. So if one is engaged in, if one racks their brain on how to expand this Krishna consciousness movement, then they come to the liberated platform. If one is preaching Krishna consciousness through the main preaching activities like Harinam, book distribution, prasadam distribution, then one can become liberated. They can get out of this material entanglement and this conditioning that keeps us going from dog to cat to hog to human to all different types of life, birth after birth after birth. And in one purport, Srila Prabhupada explains how unless one is constantly speaking with non-devotees, it is very difficult to get out of the three modes of material nature. I like that point because at first it makes you think like, wait, I thought a devotee doesn't associate with non-devotees. But what is that speaking? The devotee speaking is to inspire Krishna consciousness in others. So these activities are what brings one to the liberated platform. And actually, right at the moment someone engages in such an activity, they're on the liberated platform because their senses are engaged in Krishna's service. So at least if we want to save our own self, we should try to figure out how to maximize the amount of time in this lifetime that I'm engaged in preaching Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada has many times explained that the best form of preaching is this book distribution. So we can engage in distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. We can engage in Harinam, Sankirtan, sharing the holy name, prasadam distribution. These are the activities that that keep residents of a Krishna conscious temple alive. So there's other types of temples, such as on farms, where people work to sustain the farm, and there's more of a focus on varnashram dharma and these types of things. But the whole purpose of having the temples in the cities is for preaching, because there's people in the cities. So if we want to stay alive, at least, and we're in a place like we find ourselves in here, in Kansas City, then we need to be preaching as much as possible. And in that way, it'll become very easy to get out of these modes of nature, which are keeping us in this material world, going up and down in different species. The purpose of knowledge and of restraining the senses as prescribed in the jnana and yoga processes is automatically served in Krishna consciousness. If one is unable to give up the activities of his selfish nature, then jnana and yoga are of no avail. The real aim is for a living entity to give up all selfish satisfaction and to be prepared to satisfy the Supreme. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for any kind of self-enjoyment. He is always engaged for the enjoyment of the Supreme. One who has no information of the Supreme must therefore be engaged in self-satisfaction, because no one can stand on the platform of inactivity. All these purposes are perfectly served by the practice of Krishna consciousness. So that point is big, that no one can stand on the platform of inactivity. So our mind, and we always have to be engaged in some kind of activity. So if we're engaged in Krishna's service, then there's no question of engaging in these lower activities that pull us down keep us in this material world. And the best way to do that is to preach Krishna consciousness, because then one is fully engaged. It's a wholehearted use of our senses, our mind, our ability to speak, our ability to think, our ability to relate with other people, all of these things that Krishna has endowed us with in this lifetime. It's a full use of all of them. So it's a way that we can get quick purification and special mercy from the Lord. Like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that there's no one more dear to him than one who preaches this conversation of Bhagavad Gita to the devotees. So there's millions of devotees out in the world wandering around, wondering, when am I going to get one of Prabhupada's books? So we can go and share them with such people. And like Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, that actually have already decided the war, the way it's going to happen is already done. The guys on that side are already dead. You can fight or not fight. But either way, you're going to be engaged in fighting, either for me or for your own selfishness, because it's your nature. So, like that, we have our nature, and we've been practicing Krishna consciousness for some time. So, but we can still definitely remember what was our nature before we came to Krishna consciousness. And so Krishna is telling Arjuna that just engage in serving me full time, because you know what your full time engagement has been in this lifetime, maybe past lifetimes too. So unless you want to engage in that way again, then make sure to be fully engaged in my service. Then you'll easily give up all these lower dharmas, these lower so-called duties. And for a lot of us, at least in Kali Yuga, and especially in these parts of the world, those lower duties were horrible. But if we fully engage in Krishna's service, then there's no room for Maya, because Krishna is just like the sun. And that's how Devahuti actually became perfect. I was reading about this in the Bhagavatam. Became perfect and went back to Godhead. The way she did that is that she had attachment for Krishna in his form of Lord Kapila. And because of that attachment to Krishna, she didn't have any attachment left for this material world. So, and what was the situation she was in? She was in a situation that's very easy to be attached to. Her home, nowadays people want the house by the sea, but her home is on the bank of the river Saraswati, and it was so nice that the denizens of heaven would become envious seeing it. It's a celestial palace with celestial maidservants that were made from her husband's mystic potency. And the walls are made of jewels. The house doesn't even need lights because the jewels are reflecting light inside the home. There's gardens with lotus lakes and everything. And so these maidservants are always caring for her and all these different things. So it's a very nice arrangement, but she didn't care a fig for it because she had attachment to Krishna. She was attached to her son, Krishna, in his incarnation of Lord Kapila Dev. So that's how it works. If our attachment is to Krishna, which we get from chanting his holy name, then we become detached from this material world. So if we don't chant attentively, then again become attached to this material world, because that's how we've been since time immemorial. So again, material desires, material thoughts, the material conditioning comes back up. But the more that we fully give a wholehearted attempt to chant the holy name each day, then we become less attached to this material world, because we're associating with Krishna, who's all attractive in the form of his holy name, and we become more attached to him. So that's why it's important that we balance all of the different activities we're doing in devotional service. But if there's not the priority for the chanting, then there's no chance of any of the other activities. You can say, yeah, maybe I'll do a little more preaching, or I'll do a little more study, or I'll do, a little less of that and a little more. But if the I can think of, there's just a really nice way this one devotee said it. Said if we don't read, if we just do the japa and we don't read, then eventually we'll stop doing the chanting because we don't know why we're doing it. And he said if we just do service and then anyway, he lined it up all nicely, but and then it ends with, but if we try to do the service and the reading and not the chanting, then we're finished. Nothing will happen. Because that's what's keeping us alive in devotional service, is that by associating with Krishna, which we're doing when we associate with his holy name, we become attracted to him, attached to him. And then because we're attached to Krishna, we're not attached to the material world. But as much as we lazy in getting that attachment for Krishna, then this attachment for the material world, which we've had since time immemorial, just floods back in and we're lost. So chanting Hare Krishna, reading these books that are explaining to us why we're chanting, why we're engaging in devotional service, how it's all working, and preaching Krishna consciousness and all the regular activities that we have throughout the day, and the temple programs, the deity worship, all these things are essential, and it's the perfect package for bringing us back home, back to Godhead in this very lifetime, actually, in this very, at least that's what happened with Devahuti, is, and Srila Prabhupada said that's in the purport, he explains that this is the possibility and this is the example, is in that very same body she was in, she became perfect and went back to the spiritual world because she was attached to Krishna. So that's the goal, is to become attached to Krishna by engaging in his devotional service and purely serve him with love and devotion and to please him. And he says, no one is more pleasing to me than one who preaches this science of Krishna consciousness to the devotees. So we can preach this science through Srila Prabhupada's transcendental book distribution. Are there any comments or questions?
All right, there you go. So we're connected to Krishna through the guru, correct? I mean, that's so our connection with our spiritual master goes on beyond this life as well into the next, and through him to Krishna. Is that correct?
Yeah, we say that we sing every morning in the Guru Puja that he's my Lord birth after birth. So yeah, that is an eternal connection. And you're right, we're connected with Krishna through the spiritual master. So we also sing in the Mangalarti that Yasya prasada bhagavat prasado, Yasya aprasada nagati kutopi. So by the mercy of the spiritual master, one gets the mercy, or by the mercy of Krishna, one gets the spiritual master, and by the mercy of the spiritual master, one gets Krishna. But the translation of that line specifically, actually, in the Mangalarti, is that by pleasing the spiritual master, Yasya prasada bhagavat prasado, by pleasing the spiritual master, one gets the prasad of Bhagavan, the mercy of Krishna. If the spiritual master is pleased, Krishna is pleased. But then the next one, Yasya aprasada, if the spiritual master is displeased, then one doesn't know where they're headed. So this is the real key to success, is seeing that the spiritual master is pleased, and he'll be pleased if we follow this program of pure devotional service that's being given in all of Srila Prabhupada's books and from his lotus mouth and his lectures. So anything else? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai.